The poem I want to read and briefly introduce today has nothing to do with influenza or epidemics or hospitals. It is in fact part of a longer poem by William Wordsworth, usually called Tintern Abbey, but the proper title is Lines Written a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey on Revisiting the Banks of the Wye during a tour July the 13th, 1798. That's certainly an unusual title, and I think it probably emphasizes the fact that the writing of the poem was an event. So we're not just to think of the poem as something fixed on the page, but is something that was actually composed in a certain place on a certain day. The poem was written and published in July 1798 because it was part of lyrical ballads. Now, Wordsworth had met Coleridge the year before, and they'd spent a lot of time together with Wordsworth's sister, Dorothy. And this was an amazing story of two young artists inspiring each other and being friendly rivals, a bit like Lennon and McCartney. So I'd say Coleridge is John Lennon, Wordsworth, Paul McCartney. Anyway, they collected a number of poems and they decided to publish it. They were living near each other in Somerset, in the west of England, and they decided to publish. In Bristol, there was a young publisher, same age as them, who'd helped a lot of poets, Joseph Cottle, and Wordsworth and his sister went to Bristol to see the volume through the press. It was quite a complicated and long procedure. And when that had started and was underway, they decided to take a few days off, and they decided to go to the Wye Valley. Wordsworth had been there 5 years before, and they took a boat from the Severn estuary near Bristol up to where the Wye Valley started. The Wye is a confluent of the Severn, and they had a vigorous few days of walking, including this spot just above Tintern Abbey. And Wordsworth then composed the poem, not really there, as the title suggests, but on the way back. As he was walking, it was his custom to, as for Coleridge too, to compose poems while out walking, and then to write them down when you got back home. So he tells us, in fact, that he composed this poem while walking on the way back to the boat, and then they took the boat again back to near Bristol. It was not very near Bristol because another 4 hours walk. They went up via the hills north of Bristol called the Clifton Downs, and then down the road that goes from there to the centre, which is called Queen's Road. And he said he finished the poem as he was walking down Queen's Road. And that must mean finished composing the poem in his head. Then he must have gone back to where they were staying, and he must have written it up. And then he took it to Joseph Cottle, and the volume was just about finished. So they added this poem at the end. So Lyrical Ballads is this amazing collection in which the first poem is The Ancient Mariner, and the last poem is Tintern Abbey, or Lines. Anyway, this is a poem, as I say, not about Tintern Abbey, but about revisiting a river valley, a beautiful place. And then that's the first part. And then you've got a middle part in which Wordsworth explains his philosophy about the influence of natural forms and the benefits, the beneficent effects of being among beautiful natural forms. Half of which I'll read, the other half I won't. And then the final part is when he turns to his sister who's with him and says, well, I hope you remember this too. And this second visit is special because I'm with you. Okay, so here's the reading. I'll record it separately. Here we are then, lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey on revisiting the Wye during a tour, July the 13th, 1798. "5 years have passed, 5 summers, with the length of 5 long winters, and again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs that on a wild secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard-tufts, which in this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue and lose themselves mid groves and copses. Once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice, as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave where by his fire the hermit sits alone. These beauteous forms, through a long absence, have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft, in lonely rooms, and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them in hours of weariness sensations sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, and passing e'en into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. Feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Nor less, I trust, to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burthen of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on until the breath of this corporeal frame, and e'en the motion of our human blood, almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things.